Hi, I'm Kate from dailytarotgirl.com and welcome to my Tarot Card Meanings Deep Dive series, where each week I dive into one major arcana card and explore its meanings, its symbols, its secrets, its wisdom, its light side and its dark side. So this week we are going to be diving into the moon. Now the image that you will see on your screen, let me just move over here. The image that you see on your screen is from the Universal Waite Tarot. So I have to admit that the moon is, I feel like I say this about every card every week. This is one of my favorite cards. I love the moon. I don't really think of the moon as being a positive card or a negative card. It's kind of more neutral, but it is a very mysterious card. And I'm always drawn to the mysterious side of life. And so that's what I love about the moon. So I'm going to give you some keywords for the moon. So unconscious, subconscious, mystery, unknown, what is hidden, and cycles and patterns. Those are some of the keywords of what the moon represents. I'm going to start by diving into the symbols on this card because this is a very symbol-rich card. There's a lot going on this card and these symbols are fascinating. So the first symbol I want to start with is the crayfish or the lobstery thing that is coming up out of the water. Now that represents our primordial past and how we came from the sea. You know, many years ago we came from the sea. So it represents our primordial state and what we evolved from. And the other symbol that I find really fascinating is the three layers, sort of the three colors of earth. So if you look at the bottom of this card, there's water, and then up from the water there is light green grass, and then there's dark green grass kind of in the background, and then in the far background there's the blue mountains. And those three layers, I'm kind of not really including the water in this layer, but the light green, the dark green, and the blue represent the three states of consciousness: the unconscious, the subconscious, and the fully conscious. So the blue at the top, the mountain peaks, represent being fully conscious. So think about being, you know, on the top of a mountain, being able to look down and have a really good view of everything. And there's this path that's going through these layers. And this is really similar to the Temperance card. If you compare these two cards, the Temperance also has these three layers and a path going through the background. And that path just represents, I think, the life path that we're on and the path to these different states of consciousness, the exploration of, you know, the unconscious, bringing the conscious up into the subconscious and eventually into the conscious. So, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about those states as we talk more about this card. The other symbol that's fascinating on the moon is the two towers. These are the same two towers in the Death card. So if you look at the Death card, and I'll show it to you now so you can have a look. These same two towers are in the background. You almost don't notice them. They're right in the background of the Death card. And in between them is the sun rising. And on the moon, we have the moon in between them. Now, these two towers represent a kind of like a gateway, maybe even a portal, a gateway into the unknown. So we see those two towers on Death, we see them in the moon. And this can also be compared to some of the cards that have two pillars, like the High Priestess has two pillars, Lady Justice has two pillars. And the two pillars or two towers kind of represent a bit of a gateway or a portal even. And the other symbol is the dog and the wolf. So on the left-hand side, we have a domesticated looking dog. And then on the right-hand side, we have a more wild wolf. And these two things represent, so the domesticated dog represents the domesticated side of ourselves. And then the wild wolf represents the more wild, untamed, kind of animalistic side of our nature. This is our instinctual side, the side that's connected to instincts and intuition, maybe even psychic ability. And then the domesticated dog is like our kind of the domesticated side of who we are. And of course, the wild, instinctual kind of animalistic side is also tied into the subconscious. And the moon is really, it's all about the subconscious and the unconscious, which I'm gonna dive into in a second here. Now, the last but not least is the symbol of the moon itself. And it's sometimes easy to confuse the moon on this card as a sun because it's got these rays and it's bright yellow and it's glowing. But the moon itself is a really powerful symbol, and it symbolizes cycles. So just think of like the lunar cycle and cycles that tie in with other things. Like the lunar cycle ties in with the tides and menstruation. So it represents cycles and patterns, but that are tied in with other things that have effects on other areas of life. And the moon also represents dim light. So think about, and I want to kind of compare this card to the sun for a minute. The sun is like really harsh, bright light. The moon is more of like casts kind of a glow. And so when moonlight shines on things, it casts a very dim light. So you can kind of see your way, but there's lots of things that you don't see. All right, so I'm gonna dive into the dark side and the light side of this card. And like I said, I think of the moon as being kind of a neutral card. I don't really think of it as being really positive or negative, but I get excited when it shows up. So the dark side of the moon is that it can represent being controlled by inner forces that you don't understand and things that are hidden and that might cause a sense of confusion. It's about not really understanding yourself and why things are the way that they are or why things are happening. And sometimes this can bring up a feeling of uneasiness or fear or just kind of confusion. So that's the dark side of the moon. And one thing I'm going to talk about, off and on throughout this whole video is the moon, how it's tied to our subconscious and our unconscious. And if you think that there's so much going on an unconscious level that we're not really aware of, and often the things that we are afraid of and the things that we desire, a lot of this comes from, an unconscious need or desire or fear. And it can be a strange phenomenon to feel like you are being motivated by something that you don't fully understand. Now, the light side of the moon, the bright side, is that the moon is an invitation to dive deep into your subconscious and your unconscious and really explore yourself this way. So it's an invitation to explore the world of dreams, intuition, psychic abilities, all that fun stuff. And it's also an invitation to pay attention to the cycles and patterns in your life as a way to know yourself better. So let's dive into 3 key areas for this card. So let's start with the unconscious and the subconscious realms. So the moon reminds us that there is this huge unconscious component in everything. I want you to think of an iceberg. Think of an iceberg that, 80 to 90% of it is underwater, and then there's this little bit that's sticking up. The part you see is just kind of the tip of the iceberg, but underwater, what you don't see is actually, so much more. And our consciousness, our collective unconscious, it's kind of like that. A big part of who we are and our motivations and fears and needs are actually more subconscious or unconscious in nature. There's so much about who we are that we don't really fully understand. Okay, so it's this unconscious part of ourselves and its accompanying fears and desires and needs that is often the driving force behind our motivations and our feelings and our actions. The moon invites us to go inward and explore this part of ourselves through dreams, intuitions, through connecting with our wild side, and really honoring our instincts. Things like hypnosis, lucid dreaming, dream journaling, dream interpretation, meditative journey. So that's where you kind of get relaxed, go into a meditative state, and go on a little bit of a journey. You can do it with like a guided meditation thing, or you can do it just with music or drumming. So meditative journeying, even free writing, where you just get relaxed, you sit down with a paper and a pen, and you just write for like 5 or 10 minutes without thinking, without censoring, just see what comes out. And it's really interesting what can sometimes come out on the page. Even some psychedelic substances can help people sort of explore the side of themselves and really meander through this mysterious realm. And when we start to explore this realm, we can make all kinds of interesting discoveries. And it's not for the faint of heart. You may discover things that you don't want to know, so proceed with caution, but the moon is an invitation to explore this realm and make all kinds of fascinating discoveries. So I want to tell you a little bit of a story here. So I have been lucid dreaming since I was a young child, and it's something that just happens spontaneously while I'm asleep. It's not something I've ever really had control over. And every now and then I'll have a lucid dream. And so that is a dream where you're sleeping, you're dreaming, and then all of a sudden you realize that you're in a dream. And you become fully conscious in that dream, but you don't actually wake up. But you're fully conscious that it is a dream. And it's such a powerful experience. It really makes you question reality in general, because when you're in the dream and you realize it's not real, it's just a dream, but everything looks and feels so real. It's almost indistinguishable from, usual daily reality. And whenever I suddenly become fully conscious in a dream, I look around at everything in that dream and I think, this is so amazing. This is what my unconscious mind created for this dream. Everything I see in this dream is a creation of my unconscious mind. All the people, all the symbols in the dream, the furniture, or wherever I am, the colors, everything is a creation of my unconscious. This is what it's kind of vomited out. And everything probably means something, perhaps. And so then looking at everything in the dream through that lens can be fascinating. It's a really fascinating way to explore your unconscious mind or your subconscious mind. All right, so I have a couple of journaling questions for you. What themes and symbols and emotions often appear in your dreams? So if you're someone who can sometimes remember your dreams, do you notice that there's certain symbols or themes that pop up again and again and again? And if you feel like sharing in the comments below, I'd love to hear what they are. So I have been journaling my dreams. So I write my dreams down. I've been doing it for about 13 or 14 years now, at least. And just recently I started reading through all my dream journals, and I noticed that there's certain things that appear again and again and again in my dreams. And it's obviously a symbol that my unconscious mind is trying to communicate to me with. So I often dream of the ocean, being on water, being on a ship. Sometimes the ship is sinking, other times it isn't. But that's one kind of symbol that I encounter again and again in my dreams. Another question I have for you is, I want you to think of a time when your wild, instinctual side, your kind of animalistic nature, came through really strongly for you. And how can you honor this part of yourself? Now, these questions, I'm going to post them below the video. So there's going to be a text box below the video. I'm going to have the journaling questions there. I'll also include a link to the blog post version of this video. So if you want to see all this stuff written, if you just go to that link, that will take you there. So let's dive into the second area of the moon, the second realm. So this is the hidden, the mysterious, and the unknown. So the moon tells us that there is so much that we don't know. What we are aware of is just our limited perspective. So think about, going to a party and there's a bunch of people at the party. Maybe you know most of them, maybe you know some of them, and you might know certain things about certain people. But there is so much that you don't know. You just have one little perspective. So, you know, maybe this person is having a secret affair with this person. Maybe this person is really upset about something, but no one knows about it. You know, there's this whole background and context to everyone. There's so many layers and complexities that we aren't always privy to. And so when we go through life, we're just experiencing things from our own limited perspective. And to walk through life as if you know everything that's going on, as if you know the score, you know, that's just total foolishness. Okay, so another way to illustrate the moon and how it represents the hidden and the mysterious, I want you to imagine walking through a garden at nighttime. And maybe there's a full moon in the sky, so it's casting this beautiful silver glow out on the courtyard in the garden. And you're sort of fumbling through this garden, and you'll be able to find your way because the moon is lighting things up. But there will be lots of shadows and hidden areas. And sometimes when there's shadows and we don't see things clearly, we tend to, our unconscious mind will project onto what is unknown and will project its own kind of fears or even desires or hopes onto the scene. So let's say you're walking through this garden at night, there might be a shrub that you think looks like a monster or a person hiding, or you might see like a spider or a snake, but it turns out it's just a vine or it's just a flower. So our subconscious or our unconscious mind has this way of projecting some of its, you know, primal fears onto what we don't know, what we don't understand. And then, of course, think of being in that garden as the sun comes up and the sun shines this clear, crisp light on everything, and you see everything clearly. So the moon, with the moonlight, you see some details, but not all. And as the sun comes up and everything's fully illuminated, you see how you kind of misunderstood certain things. The moon encourages us to honor the mystery and accept that sometimes we cannot know everything. Some mysteries will remain unsolved, and sometimes we'll remain in the dark about something until the time is right. And there is real wisdom in realizing that you just don't know something, that you don't know everything. So a couple of journaling questions for you. What big mysteries would you like to solve? What big unknowns would you like to make known? And if you want to share in the comment section below, feel free. I'd love to hear it. So a few things mysteries that I would love to discover is, you know, what happens when you die? I mean, I've certainly read books about this, but I don't know for sure for myself. So this is a big question I have. What happens when you die? What is the meaning of life? You know, what's the meaning of all of this craziness? And then there's like, those are kind of existential things. And then there's like more sort of minor questions I have, like, what does this person think of me? You know, things like that. How does this person feel about me? Another question is, what is your relationship with mystery and the unknown like? Are you one of these people that really struggles with not knowing something? Like, does it keep you up at night? Do you try to forcefully uncover something and delve into it? Or are you able to relax and enjoy the mysterious side of things and really just wait for things to be revealed in due time? The third area of the moon is that it represents cycles and patterns. So the moon symbolizes the lunar cycle, which is tied to the tides and the fertility cycles, and the moon in and of itself is a symbol of the waxing and waning energies. So think of, you know, when the moon is waxing, it's, you know, the energy is building. Then when it's a full moon, you know, that's where energy is at its peak. And then as it wanes, it dies back down. And then we have a new moon, and that's where things are kind of dark and calm and quiet and still. So the moon encourages us to really notice the cycles that occur in our lives and to honor them. So these are like the natural cycles. So whether it's like the lunar cycle, the menstrual cycle, or just like cycles of energy. I know like I'm always in this weird cycle of creativity where I will feel very creative and I'll have all this inspiration and ideas and so much energy and focus, and I'm really productive. I'm in one of those states right now where I have all these ideas for courses and videos and books and things like that. And then I'll go through periods where it's like the exact opposite. I'm very unmotivated and feeling really uninspired. And so the moon encourages us to honor those cycles, and instead of trying to override them, see if you can find a way to live in harmony with them and work with them. The moon also reminds us that we have cycles and patterns within our personal lives that are often either subconscious or unconscious. So think of like anger. You know, maybe you are in a habit of repressing anger. If something happens that really bothers you, you don't want to speak up because it's uncomfortable, so you don't say anything. So you suppress your frustration, your anger. And you keep suppressing it, and then one day you just blow up and get really mad. And then maybe you get depressed after. And so there's this kind of like pattern, there's this cycle. And anyone who's struggled with addictions will intimately know that sort of cycle of addiction. There's also cycles of self-sabotage and relationship patterns that we get into, like sabotaging ourselves in relationships, kind of in the same way, again and again with different partners. So many of our habits and our patterns are tied to our subconscious and our unconscious, and our unconscious needs and desires. So for example, if you're the kind of person who, as soon as you get money, you want to spend it, you know, maybe there is like this subconscious or unconscious fear of having a lot of money, like fearing that maybe if you have money, it might be taken from you, or you'll get in trouble for having too much and for hoarding. And so you might not really be aware of that unconscious fear, but whenever you get money, you immediately have to spend it on something, even if you don't need anything. So simply recognizing the repetitive and the cyclical nature of things and seeing a pattern is the first step in bringing the unconscious up into the conscious realm. So this is how we begin to know ourselves and unravel the mystery of ourselves. And it's interesting to note that things like the lunar cycles, menstrual cycles, other cycles often serve to churn up unconscious energy so that it can be looked at and worked through. So this is the work of, you know, if you look at this card, and I talked about the 3 layers of the green grass, the dark green grass, the blue mountains, those 3 layers of consciousness, you know, paying attention to being aware of our cycles and patterns is a way to bring up some of those unconscious things and bring them up into the light of consciousness. So a couple of journaling questions for you. What cycles do you feel most prominently in your life right now? And feel free to share if you want to share in the comment section. What cycles do you feel most prominently right now? And what habits or patterns do you notice in yourself? So it could be patterns that come up in your relationship. It could be patterns that come up in your work. Patterns and habits that come up in terms of how you treat your body. It could be like eating patterns, eating habits. But notice what habits and patterns do you notice in yourself, and what unconscious fears or unconscious needs might they be tied to? Is this fear or desire or need just yours, or is there a collective unconscious component to it? And this is an interesting thing to recognize, is that often our unconscious needs and fears and desires, it's not just us, it's not just like your personal fear. These are collective unconscious fears and desires that so many people have. And so if you're struggling with a particular pattern or something in your life, know that it's not just you. You are kind of tapping into this collective issue. And you're experiencing it in your own unique way, but it's not just you. And sometimes that can be almost a relief, and it can feel, you feel like you're not alone. And when you work on your own patterns and habits and issues and subconscious needs and fears, you actually help the collective as well. So the wisdom of the moon is that the moon tells us that life is mysterious and we are mysterious. And while we cannot know everything, we can certainly dive deep and begin to explore. Our personal unconscious is a gateway. Remember those two towers on either side being a gateway. Our personal unconscious is a gateway to the collective unconscious. And by coming to better know ourselves, we can come to better know and understand others and the world around us, allowing some of our old fears to melt away. Because remember, when we don't understand something, when we can't look at something clearly, we sometimes project our own fears and anxieties onto it. Do not be afraid to journey inward, for that which you do not understand will continue to cast terrifying shadows and play tricks on your mind if you never cast your light of consciousness upon it. So that is my deep dive into the moon. So thank you so much for joining me. I hope you learned lots about the moon, and be sure to subscribe to my channel if you enjoyed this video. I'm uploading these videos once a week, and be sure to check out my website, dailytarotgirl.com. I've got tons of fun tarot learning resources on there to help you learn tarot. And if you want to pop on my mailing list, I'm going to put the link to do so in the comment section below the video, and you'll be the first to be notified whenever I post new content or whenever I'm offering any upcoming classes or workshops or free live events. So next week we're going to dive into the sun. So thank you for joining me, and I will see you next week.